currently we've kept the repo rate quite stable. We haven't raised it, we've kept it constant, and that's mainly coming from the fact that we feel that the domestic economy still needs a boost.
If you are someone who has heard the word repo rate somewhere and you're just like, I don't understand, you are in the right place. Bank of Namibia's Mbazima-Lando, who's the Principal Economist for Policy Research, joins me in studio this afternoon as the central bank embarks on an educational campaign called Ask the Central Bank. And I know you have questions, but we're going to try and tackle as many of them as possible over the course of the next few. So covering topics like, amongst others, the repo rate. That we as the ordinary man and woman on the street find very difficult to understand at times, what it means, why it's being used by the central banks. And our guest today, Daisy, is here to tell us more. Daisy, firstly, welcome to 99 FM.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Let's dive into that. I mean, we hear repo rate everywhere, but not everyone has the understanding. So just explain to us what the repo rate is.
Okay, so the repo rate is actually a policy rate that is used by the central bank. So it's an interest rate that the central bank uses to lend money to the commercial banks. And then that also sets the tone for market interest rates that relate to, if you have to take out a mortgage, you have to buy a car, and so forth. But then again, from the side of the commercial banks, they also have to, assess your credit worthiness and so forth. So it's actually the interest rate that the central bank uses. And basically.
And in terms of Bank of Namibia now, how does the Bank of Namibia need to adjust, and why does it need to adjust the repo rate?
Okay, so the Bank of Namibia needs to adjust the repo rate so that we know what kind of risks are emanating domestically and globally. We try to make sure that it reflects current economic conditions, and so that we also try and keep an eye on inflation. Are the prices of goods and services rising higher than expected? What are the risks going forward, and so forth? So we kind of have to have our eyes on that.
And what is the frequency of adjusting? How often does the Bank of Namibia review and potentially then adjust the repo rate? And what factors prompt such reviews?
Okay, so the Bank of Namibia, as the central bank, usually have their monetary policy committee meetings 6 times yearly, so 6 times a year. But then the meetings actually take place every 2 months. And what we're essentially looking at are developments in the domestic economy. Firstly, how are things evolving? How have they evolved over the last 2 months? We also need to look at how are things evolving from a global economy, because as you know, Namibia is a small open economy, and we are trading with a lot of countries and so forth. And basically, we also need to review in that way certain macroeconomic indicators that we feel are necessary and would give us a good direction of where the domestic economy is going. And then obviously ultimately to have a handle on how prices are rising. Yes.
And with that, or in regards to inflation, what is the direct correlation or connection between inflation and the repo rate?
Okay, so inflation, as you know, it's the general rise in the prices of goods and services over time. So it becomes a problem, especially for central banks, if inflation is rising quickly and it's persistent. And you know that the central bank's main primary mandate is actually to keep prices stable. So that is quite important for central banks. And the association between inflation, of course, if inflation is very high, it also erodes the amount of money that you have, the amount of money that you can buy and pay for goods and services, and so forth. So we use the repo rate as a policy tool, as an interest rate, to sort of keep inflation within manageable limits. So you'll find that when we'll raise the interest rate, the repo rate, when we feel that there's a risk in terms of inflation in the short to medium term. So say in the next 12 to 18 months, it looks like prices are going to rise higher and they're going to be persistent. So we try to use the repo rate to manage those flows.
And in terms of Namibia's repo rate, why does it increase when South Africa's repo rate increases, and how does this safeguard the one-to-one link between the Namibian dollar and the South African rand?
Okay, so that is a misconception that always comes about. The Central Bank of Namibia always raises rates, the repo rate, when South Africa does. First of all, we need to understand that we're in a fixed exchange rate regime. So there's the critical aspect of ensuring that we align our interest rates with our anchor country, which is South Africa. But then there's also room for deviation in terms of the CMA agreement, the Common Monetary Area agreement, of which South Africa, of course, is the anchor country. Then you've got countries like Namibia, Lesotho, and Eswatini. So there's room to deviate. And the way we do that is we are also concerned about the current and future path of the domestic economy. So if we feel that, the domestic economy is not stimulated enough, or in the case that perhaps there's a lot of stimulation and this actually brings some risks in terms of inflation, in that regard, we're going to raise interest rates. But then this is after we've actually considered, the status, looked at all the macroeconomic indicators domestically, globally, and so forth. Yes, so it's not always that when South Africa raises and we also raise. And for example, currently we've kept the repo rate quite stable. We haven't raised it, we've kept it constant, and that's mainly coming from the fact that we feel that the domestic economy still needs a boost. Us, me and you, we help grow the economy by going to the bank and taking out credit, whether it's for business purposes, a personal loan to see how, if you're a small business. So in that way, all these goods and services that are, exchanging hands, they ultimately help in growing the economy. And the other question relates to...
The other one is just the repo rate increasing with South Africa's, which once again the anchoring is a big part of it that I guess is the misconception, and just maintaining that one-to-one link with the Namibian dollar and the South African rand, which I think you've also answered quite well, and that's what we wanted to chat about, is just the misconceptions and the things that we don't know about the repo rate, words that we see flung around so much but not truly having an understanding. So firstly, we appreciate you taking the time and just educating us and letting us know what we might not have known. So Daisy, thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait to welcome you back as we continue to take a look at the campaign Ask the Central Bank, because we have so many questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and the public is encouraged to visit our Facebook page, our Bank of Namibia website. There's a lot of information there, and we're always happy to clarify any matters related to the central bank, the repo rate, and everything that affects the public.
Thank you so much, Daisy. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And if you are listening now and you're wondering who is this with Skrypt in studio, we have the absolute pleasure of having Daisy Mbazima-Lando.